Before Rome ruled the ancient world, before its legions became synonymous with unstoppable power, there was a moment when the fate of the Republic hung by a thread, when a foreign general dared to do the unthinkable march, and army cavalry wore elephants and hardened veterans across the most hostile mountain range in Europe, not to escape Rome, but to attack it from a direction no Roman commander believed possible. And in this video, we are going to walk step by step through Hannibal Barca's legendary ambush through the Alps, not as a myth or a romantic legend, but as a calculated, brutal, and nearly war-winning tactic that brought Rome closer to destruction than at any other point in its early history. Because this was not just a daring march, it was psychological warfare, strategic deception, and logistical genius rolled into one audacious gamble that reshaped military thinking forever. And to understand how close Rome came to falling, we need to place ourselves back in the late 3rd century BCE, at a time when Rome was still a rising power rather than the dominant empire. It would later become locked in a bitter struggle with Carthage for control of the Western Mediterranean, a struggle we now call the Second Punic War, which erupted after years of unresolved tension following Rome's victory in the First Punic War, a conflict that had crippled Carthage financially and humiliated it politically, leaving deep resentment among Carthaginian leaders, especially the Barca family. And at the center of that resentment was Hannibal, the son of Hamilcar Barca, who, according to ancient historians, was made to swear an oath as a child never to be a friend of Rome, an oath that would define his entire life. And by the time Hannibal took command of Carthaginian forces in Iberia, modern-day Spain, he was already a seasoned commander, respected by his troops and feared by Rome. And when war broke out in 218 BCE, Rome expected Hannibal to fight the way everyone else did, by engaging Roman armies in Spain or possibly crossing the sea to Italy, routes Rome knew how to defend. But Hannibal did not intend to fight Rome on Rome's terms, because he understood something fundamental about Roman power, that it was strongest when it could deploy its vast manpower, its road networks, and its logistical depth within Italy. And so Hannibal conceived a plan so radical that even some of his own officers reportedly doubted it: to march from Spain through Gaul across the Alps and descend into northern Italy, not merely to raid, but to draw Rome into a decisive confrontation on terrain and timing of his own choosing. And this was not an impulsive act of bravado. It was a cold calculation based on intelligence, alliances, and a deep reading of Roman psychology, because Hannibal knew that Rome would never believe such a march was possible until it was already too late, and that disbelief itself would become a weapon. And so in the spring of 218 BCE, Hannibal set his plan into motion, assembling an army of perhaps around 90,000 infantry, 12,000 cavalry, and several dozen war elephants, according to ancient sources like Polybius and Livy, though modern historians debate the exact numbers. And while these figures may be exaggerated, there is broad agreement that Hannibal began the march with a massive and diverse force, including Libyans, Iberians, Numidian cavalry, and Celtic allies, each with different languages, customs, and fighting styles, which in itself was a logistical and leadership challenge. And yet, Hannibal managed to maintain cohesion through strict discipline, shared purpose, and his own personal charisma, marching northward through Iberia, crossing the Pyrenees, and entering southern Gaul, where he faced his first major obstacle, not mountains, but hostile tribes and Roman-aligned forces attempting to block his advance along the Rhône River. And here we already see Hannibal's talent for deception and maneuver. because rather than force a costly frontal crossing under enemy observation, he sent a detachment upstream to cross secretly, then attacked the waiting Gallic forces from behind while the main army crossed the river, a maneuver that shattered resistance and demonstrated to his troops that their commander could outthink as well as outfight the enemy. And this early success reinforced morale just as the march was about to become truly nightmarish, because once Hannibal turned east toward the Alps, he was entering terrain that few large armies had ever crossed intact, a land of narrow passes, steep cliffs, unpredictable weather and hostile mountain tribes. And it is here that the story often turns into legend. But stripped of exaggeration, the reality was likely even more terrifying, because Hannibal did not have accurate maps, reliable supply lines, or secure routes, relying instead on local guides who sometimes betrayed him, tribal negotiations that could collapse overnight, and sheer force of will to keep the army moving forward. And as the ascent began, the Carthaginian army was repeatedly ambushed by Alpine tribes, who rolled rocks down narrow paths, attacked supply trains, and vanished into the mountains, forcing Hannibal to fight brutal skirmishes in terrain that neutralized his numerical strength. And ancient accounts describe men slipping to their deaths, pack animals tumbling into ravines, and entire units freezing or starving as snow fell earlier than expected. And while some historians suggest later Roman writers exaggerated these hardships to magnify Hannibal's achievement, archaeological evidence and climatological studies suggest that conditions in the Alps during this period were indeed harsh enough to justify the accounts of extreme suffering. And yet Hannibal pressed on because turning back would have meant annihilation, and he understood that the greatest danger was not the enemy in front of him, but despair within his own ranks. And so he reportedly gathered his men at key moments to remind them of the riches of Italy waiting below, of the allies who would rise against Rome once they arrived, and of the fact that every step forward made retreat less likely and victory more necessary. And after roughly 2 weeks of fighting the mountains themselves, Hannibal's army finally descended into the Po Valley of northern Italy, but at an enormous cost, losing perhaps half of its original strength, including many elephants, thousands of infantry, and countless animals. And to a Roman strategist, this should have been the end of Hannibal's threat. An exhausted, depleted army stranded in hostile territory. But this is where the true brilliance of the Alpine ambush becomes clear, because Hannibal did not intend to defeat Rome with numbers. He intended to defeat it with timing, surprise, and psychological shock. And Rome was indeed shocked, because Roman commanders had been preparing to fight Hannibal in Spain or southern Gaul, not in their own backyard. And by the time Roman forces realized Hannibal had crossed the Alps, he was already recruiting Celtic allies who resented Roman domination, replenishing his ranks, and choosing battlefields that favored his mixed army over the rigid Roman legion system. And the first proof that the Alpine gamble had worked came at the Battle of the Ticinus River, where Hannibal's Numidian cavalry outmaneuvered Roman forces and wounded the Roman consul Publius Cornelius Scipio, sending a clear message that this was not going to be a conventional war. And soon after, at the Battle of the Trebia, Hannibal executed one of his most famous ambushes, luring Roman troops across an icy river into open ground, then unleashing hidden forces under his brother Mago from concealment, crushing a much larger Roman army. And this pattern continued, because the Alps had not just delivered Hannibal into Italy, they had conditioned him and his army for asymmetric warfare, forcing them to rely on ambush, flexibility, and terrain, skills that translated directly into battlefield success. And all of this culminated in 216 BCE at the Battle of Cannae, often cited by military historians as one of the greatest tactical victories in history, where Hannibal used a double envelopment to annihilate a Roman force, possibly twice his size, killing or capturing tens of thousands of Roman soldiers in a single day. And while Cannae itself did not involve mountains, its roots traced directly back to the Alpine crossing, because it was the surprise invasion of Italy that forced Rome into desperate, massive engagements on Hannibal's terms. And it is important to understand just how close Rome came to collapse at this moment, because after Cannae, several of Rome's allies defected. Panic spread through the city. Emergency measures were enacted, and according to ancient sources, Rome even considered negotiating with Hannibal, something that would have been unthinkable just years earlier. And yet, Rome did not fall, not because Hannibal's strategy failed, but because Rome adapted in ways that were unprecedented, avoiding direct confrontation, adopting a war of attrition under leaders like Fabius Maximus, and leveraging its immense manpower reserves to slowly wear Hannibal down. And here we reach the critical question: did Hannibal's Alpine ambush nearly defeat Rome, or was it doomed from the start? And historians remain divided, because on one hand, Hannibal achieved exactly what he intended tactically, bringing the war into Italy, defeating Roman armies repeatedly, and shaking Rome's alliance system. But on the other hand, he lacked the resources to lay siege to Rome itself, which was heavily fortified and resilient. And Carthage failed to send sufficient reinforcements to capitalize on his victories, a failure some historians attribute to political divisions within Carthage, while others suggest that Hannibal's strategy was always about breaking Rome, rather than capturing the city. And what is clear is that the Alpine crossing was not a reckless stunt, but a calculated operational ambush on a continental scale, exploiting Rome's expectations, geography, and overconfidence. And its legacy has echoed through military history ever since, studied by commanders from Napoleon to modern military academies as a case study in strategic surprise, operational endurance, and the psychological dimension of warfare. And even today, scholars continue to debate Hannibal's exact route through the Alps, using ancient texts, topographical analysis, and even biological evidence like preserved animal dung to reconstruct his path, a testament to how deeply this march has embedded itself in our understanding of what is possible in war. And while Rome ultimately survived and went on to destroy Carthage decades later, the memory of Hannibal never faded, because for a generation, Roman parents reportedly used his name to frighten children into obedience, a reflection of how deeply his campaign scarred the Roman psyche. And in the end, Hannibal's ambush through the Alps stands as a reminder that history is not shaped only by those who win, but by those who dare to challenge the impossible, forcing their enemies to confront vulnerabilities they did not know they had. And through this single audacious maneuver, Hannibal proved that even the mightiest power can be brought to the brink by imagination, courage, and a willingness to gamble everything on one bold idea. And through these reconstructions, we get just a glimpse of what it was like to stand at the edge of the known world, staring down snow-covered peaks with an empire on the other side, knowing that history itself was waiting below. And if there's another ancient battle, another forgotten commander, or another moment where the course of history nearly changed forever that you'd like to explore, Let me know in the comments, because this journey into the past is far from over. And thank you so much for watching.